Welcome back to the shop, everyone. This week we've got a 2-in-1. We've got 2022 week 50 and week 51, which is December 12th to 18th and December 19th to 25th coming at you. We are going to start this one off by opening some boxes. This is pretty routine. I wait till I get parts and then I open them. So in this case, this is my McLeod clutch. I forget what the model number is. I could always look it up if somebody wanted to know. So as it turns out, the McLeod clutch came with both pressure plate bolts and I believe flywheel bolts. And I got two sets of bolts in here, and that's when I noticed that Modern Drivelines had sent me the wrong bolts, and that's kind of what I'm looking at here. I'm like, well, I got a bunch of bolts from Modern Driveline that are supposed to be for pressure plate and flywheel, but then I got a couple more sets of bolts with my flywheel, so what's going on? And that's when I noticed Modern Driveline actually sold me bolts that were for a Ford flathead, I think it is. Anyways, those ones just have a 4-bolt crank. And those bolts will not work for me and probably not anyone around me, but whatever, I'll hold on to them. Yeah, so I think I'm just looking up my order from Modern Driveline on my phone right now, just so I can kind of see like what the differences were and why there was a difference, and we're just gonna throw that up on the shelf. Alright, we are going to do a tiny little bit of cleanup, and then we're going to start looking at some wiring diagrams. So don't worry, we do get into things that are not wiring halfway through this video, so be a little bit of a change of pace, and you don't have to watch me doing the same thing that you've watched me do for the past, I don't know, I think I'm at like 12 parts of wiring. So I don't recall if I mentioned in a previous video, but I needed to pull the VSS wires out of my input harness because I need to have those VSS wires go onto J4 of the holley dominator so that I can have the dominator drive a speedometer output. So I just received in the mail, I bought just the connector. I didn't buy a full harness or anything like that. So what I'm doing is I'm going to my pile of wires. When I bought the holley input harness and the holley output harness, it came with various lengths of wire. So that's what I have on the shelf over there. So I'm just grabbing one of those pre-terminated lengths of wire and adding that into the transmission input output harness. So what that harness has is it has the VSS input, it's got the sensor ground, and those two wires go to my VSS sensor. So there's the ground wire and then the inputs. And then I also wire in the speedometer output onto this harness. So that way everything transmission speedometer related is on that harness. You know, looking back, I probably should have put my reverse lockout output on that harness as well. Now that I think about it, I might still do that. But for the meantime, those are the 3 wires I got on there. Yeah, so I just looked at my programming, and I don't have the reverse shift lockout solenoid on the transmission harness. I looked, there's available outputs on it. So I may pull both of those out and move the wire over. Oh, but it just seems like a lot of work for no gain. It's not like I have a shortage of outputs. I'd probably be looking at 45 minutes to an hour of work at least just to move that output over. We'll see. I'm probably not gonna move it, but we'll see. So what am I doing right now? So I'm actually looking at one of my other cameras, and I'm filming a holley quick tip to talk about my experience with how to input the speed sensor and then how to drive a speedometer out. So I like to do these kind of instructional videos after I've done a pile of research, just to help out the next person. I usually, when I do these instructional videos, I will use some keywords that I search for when I'm researching this stuff, and so I'll put that in the video description and stuff like that, so that the next person that comes along, hopefully, fingers crossed, has a much easier time figuring this out. With the holley quick tip done, I'm gonna do what you've seen me do a ton. I'm gonna untape all the wires, and then I'm gonna retape them all back up. With all the taping done, we can now get the transmission harness back in the car. Can I really call it the transmission harness when it's missing some of the transmission wires that are on different harnesses? Whatever, we're gonna call it the transmission harness. So we're just gonna start laying that back out in the car. If next time you see me start wiring a car, if you invest in the companies that make zip ties, you might make a little bit of a profit, because as you can see, I go through a lot of them. I bought a 1,000 count bag, and I've probably used at least 200 out of the bag already, I'd guess. And the best part is, by the time this wiring is completely done, eventually, one day, hopefully, the only zip ties I'll use on this harness are to hold them, will actually be on the loom on the outside, just to hold the loom down to the car. So there won't actually be any zip ties touching the wires directly. So every single wire or every single zip tie you see in this video and you've seen on the car so far will all be removed. So those wires that I'm laying out there, I believe those are the fan wires that are going to trigger the fans to come on and off. So I got green with a white stripe and blue with a white stripe. So I'm just getting those in the harness and kind of up into position. So if you look on my terminal strip, the top two connections right now are the outputs. Yeah, those are the outputs from the holley to trigger the relays, and the switches coming from my switch panel above that will exist above the driver's head on the bar. So just getting those zip tied into place, and I will now run them through the car. enough wiring for the moment. So now we are going to move in. I just got a package in from Temco Industrial, and so what I got in here is I have a pile of 4-gauge welding cable, which is super flexible, and then I have a bunch of 4-gauge lugs in like 1/4, 5/16, and 3/8 size. And I'm going to be using that for pretty much all my battery cables, from the battery to the front of the car, you know, to the starter, the alternator, everything. That's what's going to power everything. So what I bought there is I bought a new crimper. So if you remember from one of my old previous videos, the crimper that I had was big yellow hydraulic thing. It was kind of hard. It was kind of cumbersome to manage. And all of the dies were metric, which all of my wire I'm dealing with AWG. There is a conversion, but I want to get a kit that specifically does AWG wire. It comes with a ton of different dies. This thing will do from, I think, like 8-gauge, or no, like number 10 ring, all the way up to, I think this kit has like 2-gauge in it, maybe. In any case, it has everything that I should need to wire this car. I shouldn't have to worry about, you know, switching between different dies to crimp the wire. It's handheld. You can run it with one hand. You don't need kind of, you know, one hand to hold the thing, one hand to pump it. It's a really, really nice unit. And what I'm doing here is, before I actually start laying any of the wires, I am just running some tests. I want to make sure that what I bought is going to do what I want it to do. It's going to look the way I want it to look. It's not going to over crimp and have those wings on the cable like the old one kind of did. So yeah, so that's what I'm doing right here. So that's one of my old 4-gauge, that's a 4-gauge wire. That's an old 4-gauge lug. It's not one of the new copper ones that I got. And I'm just running this on the I think the 4-gauge die. And I ran it on the 4-gauge die, and I was not happy with it. I think I had to crush down the crimp, and it just like flattened it out and had wings on it. So that did not make me very happy. So this right here is the 4 AWG plus die, I think. And it just doesn't hold for crap. Yeah, so I'm trying some different dies just to see how this works, and I'm just testing it out. And one of the things that I showed on camera, it was very brief, is that Temco has a policy. I don't remember if it's a 1-year warranty, but if I recall correctly, I'd have to pause on the card at that exact point in time, but I think it's a 1-year warranty. You send it back, they will take it, no questions asked. I thought that was pretty damned amazing for a company to have that sort of policy. So I just went back to confirm, and yeah, it's a 1-year full refund no matter what. I think that is just awesome. So now that I've done a bunch of testing on that red wire there, I'm grabbing the actual 4-gauge that I bought from Temco, and I start doing some testing on the 4-gauge wire. The 4-gauge wire that I got from them. I didn't have success with the 4-gauge wire I already had. I figured, you know, maybe I need to use the wire that I got from them. So yes, that's what I start testing on. I don't recall which die I'm using here. I want to say that's the 4-gauge die, and according to their sheet, that it's over crimped. It's got these little wings on the side. It's over crimped, or maybe that one was under crimped. Anyways, I do a pile more testing on the wire and the crimps that I got from Temco. So at the end of this, I was not happy with any of the crimps that I got out of this. I bought 4-gauge lugs, I bought 4-gauge cable. I was really unimpressed with this kit and all of the equipment that I got. You know, it wasn't cheap, wasn't entirely unreasonable, but in my mind I'm sitting here thinking, you know, I'm glad that Temco has a full 1-year money back, no questions asked, you know, kind of policy. But what I did is I took a step back and I actually recorded a video and I sent it off to Temco for help. I got a response from Paul over there, and he was extremely helpful. So after seeing the video, he kind of came back to me and he said, usually with the 4-gauge cable, it's a bit of an oddball, and we usually recommend that people use a 6-gauge lugs with the 4-gauge cable. And, you know, he said, hey, I'm happy to send you a few out just to test if that'll work. And I said, well, listen, I'm actually in Canada. The address that you have on file for me is just a company that brings it across the border for me. So if you send me just a few of them, it's going to cost me money to bring it across. You know, if it was within the States, they would just cover the shipping. And so we worked it out, and Paul sent me up the 6-gauge lugs in 1/4, 5/16, and 3/8. And of course, it takes a while for that stuff to get to me. So you won't see it in this video, but I did get the 6-gauge lugs later on, and they worked amazingly. They did exactly what I wanted them to. They look perfect. They crimp perfect. Everything about it is amazing. So huge shout out to Paul, a huge thank you. You know, if you ever see this, which I doubt you would, I just thank you for helping me out with that. It was I really appreciate it, and I will definitely be buying cable and lugs from those guys because customer service is awesome. The fact they've got the 1-year money back guarantee, no questions asked, that is awesome. And yeah. So now that I have that video recorded and sent off to Temco, I'm going to do a little bit more testing with this crimper. As I said, this will go down to like 10 ring. And 10 ring is... oh. Dude. I just remembered. I just crimped a bunch of 10 rings. And because I was using my hand crimpers on a fairly stiff connector, it was actually tough. I should have cracked this guy out and used it. Huh. Well, I'll try to remember for next time. But yeah, so I just want to do some more testing. I want to see how it all works. I want to make sure that all of the smaller dies do what I want them to. Yeah, so I'm just going to do some more testing here. So if I recall correctly, I'm testing a 10-gauge wire here, and I'm just throwing a couple of wires under it just to kind of simulate what it would be like. And if I recall correctly, turned out fairly well. I don't really remember though. Obviously, I'm redoing the test, so maybe I wasn't so convinced on the first one. So let's try it again. Round 3. Let's see if I can't get this sorted out. I don't know what I keep doing wrong, but you know, grab a different die. Okay, that makes a little bit more sense. Did the same thing twice, and now we're going to change it up. So that was me just trying to remember the gauge size and what's bigger and what's smaller. So I think I was happy with that last one. Even though I threw the wire out, I think I was happy with it. But before I actually use this for 10 gauge wiring on the car, I will definitely do some more practice runs. And with that, it's time to clean up. We got a big mess on the bench and in the shop, so let's clean it up. Alright, now we get to see the fruits of our labor pay off. So we can see that I've got the 2 cardboard engine plates all mocked up there, and I'm going to remove those because we have the new 3/8 inch aluminum engine plates in, fresh off the water jet. So yeah, I am going to start installing these. The rough fit, damn, that looks good. You know, the little cutout I have there for the timing cover like fits perfect. Those 2 bolt holes lined up perfectly. I couldn't have asked for more. Loving it so far. Driver's side's kind of the same story, except with that top bolt in, it's not quite lining up for some reason, or it's not tightening up. So yeah, when I have that top inner bolt on the driver's side in, I just can't quite fit the outer bolt, and I try and fit it on the passenger side, I think, at some point. In any case, I can do the top inside bolt and the bottom bolt, and those line up just fine. But the top outside bolt, I messed up when I did the drawing. It's a little bit off. So yeah, I'm at some point in time going to get them recut with the proper hole, I think. But for now, for what I'm doing, it's okay. It'll work. I've now tested the heater, or the engine plates, and now I'm going to test fit my heater plate that I drew out and had water jetted. So that's a 1/4 inch piece of aluminum there, and it fit just fine. I had no problem with it. I need to do some work on the bench, so I'm going to clean up the shop a bit more. I really hate having to walk around stuff. I can't wait until the day where I have the intercooler out of that procharger box, the procharger mounted on the car, and I can get rid of that big procharger box out of the middle of the shop. I cannot wait for that. So starting to do a little bit more work on the engine plates. So we're just gonna get right into that. So those are the tabs that I had cut out, and I had the hole cut out the exact same size of the tube. I should have gone like, you know, what, 20 thou over, maybe 50 thou over, so that way it would go around the outside of the edge a little bit easier. But instead I take this little drum sander attachment on my drill and I just open it up. This is a very long way to open up that hole, but it worked in the end. Now that I have the opening opened up a little bit, I'm kind of happy with the fitment. I am just drawing where I want to drill holes into the mounting, or into the engine plate, so that those mounting tabs will eventually bolt onto them. And we're going to do that same process on the passenger side. now that we have where we want the tabs to bolt into the engine plates set, we can pull the engine plates back off of the engine in preparation for drilling those out. Do a little bit of cleanup around the drill press. When you have a shop, you never have enough space. So we got the drill press all set up, and that is a 3/8 bit if I recall correctly. So we're going to drill the holes for the mounting tabs out to 3/8. Oh wait, which hole are we drilling out here? That, okay, so those are the 3 holes that I had fitted. I guess the holes, when the water jet cut them, they weren't 100% cut out. There was still a little like seam on the inside, so I'm just drilling out those 3 holes with the 3/8 bit. And what I'm looking for right now is a center punch so that I can center punch the holes for the mounting tabs. And with those center punched, we are going to move over to the drill press, and we are going to drill those mounting holes out to 3/8 of an inch. I got this drill press at a yard sale. I want to say it was $15 or $20, and it's old. It's, you know, it's been used, but it works pretty well. The on-off switch has a dead spot if you pull it too far, so sometimes you'll be drilling and it'll just vibrate and die, so you just gotta kind of move the on-off switch. The belt slips sometimes, but for what I paid for it, it's good. It's worked. It's done a lot. I got nothing bad to say about it. I'm actually quite surprised. I would love to one day get a mill, and that way, you know, a mill can drill holes, no problem. But you can also, I would have been able to mill my air compressor mount. I would have been able to do that myself. I wasn't able to. Yeah, so I'm just drilling out the holes in the mounting tabs as well, because I ran into the same issue I ran into with the engine plate itself, where the 3/8 hole I had water jetted out. There was just a little bit of a seam on the inside, so the bolt didn't drill fully through it, or the bolt doesn't screw fully through it. So drill those out, and now I'm just going to drill out the holes in the engine plate to mount for the mounting tabs. What I'm doing here is I'm looking for a bigger drill bit. I want to drill some of the holes out, some of the 7/16 holes out, and to do that I need a 7/16 drill bit, which I am having a bit of a tough time finding. I think I end up finding a 15/32, which is 1/32 bigger than 7/16, and I just end up using that because it's what I had. Now that we we found a drill bit, we can throw it up in the drill press, and then we can open up some of the holes in the engine plate to accept the 7/16 bolts that we're going to put through it. Yeah, so I think I mentioned this before, but on the driver's side head, I think all 3 bolts are 7/16 on this side, and I wasn't really aware of that because on the passenger side, I believe 1 or 2 of them are 3/8. So just a little life lesson that they're not necessarily all the same. So we're gonna, with only 2 bolts, because as I mentioned, the 3rd hole is not quite lining up right now, but with the 2 holes that do line up, we'll get these installed and get the tabs in place and kind of get that mocked in. Alright, so what we're going to do is we are going to start tightening down these bolts a little bit, starting on the passenger side. And I'm just kind of struggling with some bolts because, as I mentioned, all the holes aren't lined up. But that's okay, I can start tightening them down. And then we are going to move on over to the driver's side. And this top bolt here, I'm tightening. It does not tighten down. Like, it just, no matter what I do, it does not tighten down. So I'm like, okay, I'll try a different bolt. And still, like it tightened down, but it's not snug. I can't get it to tighten. And the reason for that is because it's 7/16. It's not 3/8. It's 7/16. So I think I again try to get this 3/8 bolt in and it just doesn't work. But yeah, no, it's 7/16 side, and I found that out. So yep. There we go. Now I'm trying with the 7/16 bolt, and I'm like, huh, this actually fits in there. Interesting. So I tested in the bottom hole and find out it also fits there. Okay, good to know. Since I did not realize those holes were 7/16, I only had them cut out to accept a 3/8 bolt to go through. So I'm just gonna open up those bolt holes to make sure that we can, actually use this engine plate. Just still struggling to get that bolt in. I'm pretty sure at this point I know that my bolt hole isn't lined up correctly, but maybe I don't, and maybe I'm just going to keep messing with it a bit more. That bolt there was a little too long. When I tightened it down, it did not snug up right against the engine plate. So since I don't have anything shorter, I'm just going to throw it in the vise and I'm going to cut it down. Use the bench grinder just to clean up the edges a little bit. And now I'm just kind of struggling to get it in there because the threads aren't all that great. So just taking a file, clean it up a little bit, clean up the edges, and we'll make it work. As you can see, I'm just ignoring that top right bolt hole because it's not going to work at the moment, but I was able to get the bottom one and the top left there installed, no problem. I don't know why I was trying with a 3/8 bolt on that bottom hole again. Yeah, it's just not tightening down like I would expect. Okay, so we can move on to the mounting tab. Now, the reason why I'm putting the mounting tab on the back of the engine plate is so that when, or if I ever need to remove the engine from the car, I attach the hoist, I undo the bolts, and then the whole engine will swing forwards. I don't have to lift it up and over the tab. It's just a lot, I think it's a bit easier to have the engine pull forward away from the tab instead of having to kind of lift above it and mess around like that. It's one of those things where I could have put the tab on the front, but I'm thinking ahead a little bit. And, you know, when I need to take this engine out, what's going to be easier, have the tab on the front or on the back? And I think it's going to be easier to have it on the back. That may come to bite me for some reason that I didn't think about. But I can't, at this point, I can't see any reason why I wouldn't want to have the tab on the back, so that's what I'm doing. So while the tab on the driver's side went on no problem, the tab on the passenger side here is a little bit off. So the holes didn't quite line up as I was expecting, so I'm going to open them up a little bit, and what I'm doing right now is just a little bit of air compressor maintenance. So what I'm doing is I'm refilling the desiccant, and that dries the air. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm going to use my compressor in order to run my die grinder and open up all of those holes. For the mounting tab holes, I can very easily just use the drill and the drill bit, open it up to, you know, except 7/16, even though it's a 3/8 bolt that I'm using. That'll give it a little bit of play. So this first compressor that I'm trying to use is completely seized. Sorry, this first air die grinder that I'm trying to use is completely seized. My best guess is that one of the last times I was using it, it got some water in it. I didn't really realize it. So I'm going to have to use one of my other die grinders in the meantime, and it means we have to switch the bit, like the chucks and the bits over and whatnot. I'm using a carbide burr on my die grinder, and that's just going to allow me to very quickly open up the holes. It makes very short work of this aluminum. Although the carbide burr, because aluminum is a very soft metal, it does kind of get plugged up a little bit, so I kind of have to clean it, you know, like halfway through my use of it. So just test fitting after my first set of cuts. Wasn't quite enough, so pull the plate back off and then open it up a bit more, and then I'll go and do the same thing on the driver's side. you can't see super well, but these carbide burrs, they make a hell of a mess. Just the metals just chip right away, and yeah, it just makes a huge mess. I kind of hate them, but I kind of love how fast they work. And now that I have that hole more or less holed out to what I think, I'm going to cut down another 7/16 bolt because the ones that I have are just too long. So now that I have those mocked up, what I can do is I can pull the engine plates back off the car, and I can get prepped to weld the tabs onto the tube front end. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to take my die grinder with a different accessory on it. It's just going to be a little grinding disc. and I'm going to clean up the tube, make sure that it's, you know, nice clean metal. I'm going to clean up the welding tab or the mounting tab itself. And then what I'll do is I will reinstall the plates, make sure the tabs are tight, make sure the plates are tight to the engine, and then I will throw a few tacks on the mounting tabs. Since the next thing I need to do is weld, I need to get my welder over there, and having the fab table and all of that stuff in the way kind of annoys me. So let's do some cleanup and then we'll get to tacking in those new engine plates. some acetone in order to clean the metal. And as you saw in one of my previous videos, I broke my acetone bottle, so I'm just going straight out of the jug right now. I think at this point in time I do have some new bottles ordered, but I don't think they've arrived yet. But that's good enough. So yeah, so we can just get ready to tack those tabs on. So with those tacks in there, the engine is now technically being supported by both engine plates, but if we look, I can undo the bolts on the Tiniest engine plate and they pretty much just pop out, which means, you know, there's no force on them. Yeah, they come out pretty easily, so I'm really happy with that. I got absolutely no complaints. Yeah, look at this. You know, this is the last bolt. Pulled it out. The engine didn't fall on the ground. The car's still in one piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that water pump off, and then the Tiniest engine plate comes out, and I will see if anyone locally wants to buy it, because I have no use for it. And now that I have the head-mounted engine plates drawn up, I could always get a new set of those built anytime I want if I ever do another small block Ford foxbody. Yeah, I'd never use this water pump style mount ever again. I would always use a head-mounted engine plate. Just so much nicer in my opinion. It does mess with the accessories a little bit. Like, you would need your brackets planed down a little bit just to keep the belt in line. But I was able to get that done recently and it wasn't a big deal, and everything worked out just fine. So yeah, so now I got the Tiniest engine plate out of there. I can cut out the old tabs, and then what I'm going to do is I got a little happy with the grinder. So I am going to weld up the few spots that I nicked the tube front end. So just added a few more tacks to the tabs just to make sure it's good and solid. And now I'm just gonna put the water pump back on. Obviously I have no gasket in place here, so I'm not gonna crank it down. I don't want to do that. But I'm just gonna get it loosely in place, and I'm gonna use all of that nice stainless steel socket head cap screw hardware. Now that I'm done with the engine plates, I can put the welder away. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to start on my alternator bracket install. You can see the box that I got. There are no instructions that came with this, so I'm just trying to figure this out on my own. Hopefully get you a little bit of a better view here. So what I'm doing is I'm working on a instructional video on how to install this alternator bracket for a small block Ford. I wasn't able to find anything on this specific part number, so I figure I'll do a video and then I'll put it out. First thing, it looks like the bracket is interfering with the water pump. Again, this isn't a stock water pump, this is a zero water pump, so I'm going to have to modify the bracket to get that into place. And through some of this, as you can see, we are week 50, 51, so, you know, middle of December. You can see it's a little chilly in the shop. You can see my breath. But I don't care. I'm having a good time. As I'm working, I'm warm. No problems. I'm enjoying it. And I love working on the car. I love making progress on this car, so even if it's a little bit chilly, who cares? Get out there, do it. Alright, so now that I have found out how much I need to take out of this bracket, I'm going to take my angle grinder and I'm going to do that. I'm going to knock a chunk out of this bracket. Now that I've knocked a good chunk out of that bracket, do some test fitting, see if I got enough, see if I need to go more. Doesn't look like I knocked out enough, so back to work, knock out a bit more, do the same thing I did before. So it looks like this time I got it, and now that the hole's lining up, I'm going through the rest of the kit, trying to figure out how this all works. Yeah, I'm just trying to find a bolt that's going to be long enough for the alternator bracket. Now that I have the initial bracket kind of in place, I'm just trying to figure out how this alternator is supposed to fit on here. Like, it's not going to fit the way it is right now, so I'm going online to see if I can find any pictures or videos or anything that's going to help me out with how to install this damn thing. Yeah, as it sits now, that alternator has no hope of fitting. This bracket is not installed in any remotely correct way, shape, or form. But yet I keep trying to fit it in. Actually, I think I'm doing the instructional video now, showing my struggles. Since this is clearly wrong, let's pull it back off. So at this point in time, I have gone away and I have found some pictures, and I think I actually found the instructions for this, maybe on the manufacturer's website, kind of tucked away. So yeah, as you can see, I put a spacer behind it on the top. The spacer is going on the bottom. And if you can see, there's a fairly large gap between the bracket and the water pump. So all of that grinding on the back of it that I did did not need to do. This will easily clear and work with my zero water pump. I just jumped the gun. And as you can see, now my alternator is installing. At least it's hanging in there. No problems. The only thing is there is a spacer that goes behind the alternator ear and and the head. But because I have those 3/8 engine plates, that spacer does not fit correctly. So I need to address that at some point. But until then, I can finish bolting the water pump up, throw the air conditioning bracket back on because I'm happy with that. I'm happy with the fact that the alternator actually fits in there now. Life's kind of good. One thing I need to do is I need to modify the AC bracket because there is a little buckle, little turnbuckle for the alternator mount that doesn't fit past this little raised part of the bracket. So you can see that's the little that's the adjuster there on the bench, and I'm just making it so that that little ear clears and everything will be happy, hopefully. So we start by putting the AC bracket on loosely. We'll throw a bolt into the adjuster, and then we will roughly get this into place. So that's an alternator off of a 94-95 Mustang, if I recall correctly. So it's one of the upgraded 3G style alternators, which didn't come stock on a foxbody. The mounts are a little bit different, if I recall. So this foxbody alternator bracket doesn't 100% work. The bolt hole just doesn't line up. I end up just getting it held together with a 1/4-inch bolt instead of the, I think, 3/8 that it's supposed to be. For mock-up, it's fine. That's not going to be the final alternator that I'm putting in the car anyways. I'm going to go to a 1-wire alternator. So I don't need to work. I'll do the finishing work when I get the actual alternator I'm going to use in this car. Hey, look at that. I finally adjusted the camera to a slightly less useless angle so you can kind of see what I'm doing. So yeah, so I'm just going through doing some of the instructional video stuff, giving you an overview of the bracket and kind of how it all works now that it's all put together. So I'd mentioned before that there's a spacer that goes between the alternator and the head, and that's it in my hand there. So as I also mentioned, because of my 3/8 of an inch thick engine plate, that spacer is now way too long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and knock 3/8 out of it. So I'm just doing a bit of basic math. I have grabbed the length of the spacer. I'm going to take 3/8 off of it, and then that'll give me my final length, so I know that I haven't gone too short. I initially tried to just use the belt sander to knock this down 3/8 of an inch. Terrible idea. That's a fairly hard steel, and it is not moving hardly at all. It barely moves. I grind on here for what feels like an eternity to me, and it barely moves. So I've decided to throw this in the vise and do something a little bit more intelligent and just cut it with my grinder. The reason why I didn't really want to do this is if I don't get the cut straight, then, you know, it may not be, like the alternator bracket might kind of go out of alignment, and then maybe it'll throw a belt. But luckily I've got a like 90-degree fence on the sander there, and I'm just measuring in a few different places on that spacer to make sure it's the same all the way around. And now we can pull out that bottom 7/16 bolt, throw the spacer in there, and boom, Bob's your uncle. Alternator bracket installed, spacer installed. That is nice. And now I'm just gonna mess around, and I'm going to make sure I got right size water pump bolts and all that good stuff. Yeah, I just spent some time going through the bolts that I have and make sure that the water pump has correct size bolts to hold it all the way around. Now that all the hardware is in the water pump, I'm happy with it. I'm going to organize my leftover bolts and put them all into bags and then throw them on in the bolt bin. Alright, so now I can start working on figuring out the power steering pump and the alternator and how, or sorry, not the alternator, the air conditioning compressor, and figure out how that's going to work. So that right there is the air compressor mounting bracket, and that goes right up against the head typically. And there is my power steering pump on its new bracket that you guys saw last week. And in that box you just briefly saw, that is a box from LMR, and that is a full timing cover bolt kit. So that right there is a 7/16 stud that is going to go all the way through. Typically that would go through the air conditioning bracket, through the power steering pulley, through the air conditioning compressor mount into the head. But again, because I have that 3/8 engine plate, my air conditioning bracket is too thick. So what I need to do is I need to get it machined down so that all of this will work. But what I can do until then is I can start figuring out how the rest of this stuff mounts and how like what bolts I need to use where. LMR does have a very nice diagram that comes with the box. I don't remember if it came in the box or if I had to print it out from their website, but it lists exactly where each bolt goes, and I believe it's the full size as well. So when you print it out, if it's 100% scaled, like, the bolt is factually represented. So yeah, so you can see I've got that stud that's going to go through the procharger bracket and then go through the power steering bracket and then into the head. So yeah, so I'm starting to work on the procharger bracket. So I'm pulling the tensioner out, I'm pulling the pulley off the procharger because we know it's not going to clear right now. No idea what I'm doing with the procharger right now, but that is a nice looking pulley if I do say so myself. Hey, there we go. So yeah, we're just getting the camera set up. I'm doing an instructional video on procharger with AC, with power steering, the full 9 yards. So just talking about the procharger, some of the hardware that comes with it. Then we're going to swing back over to the bracket and we're going to mount the procharger and just loosely mount it in there. Now that the TMZ engine plate's out of the way, I can actually mount it on the car without it hitting anything. So I just quickly put the pulley back on just to show that with the TMZ front end, it does not clear. There's no chance in hell of that procharger going on there with the pulley installed. Yeah, it's kind of frustrating that there is no chance of that pulley clearing the TMZ front end, and I'm going to have to address that somehow. I'm not sure yet. But with this procharger pulley that will not fit, that does bring us to the conclusion of this week's episode. And as always, if you have stuck around this long, I would like to thank you for viewing, and we'll catch you in the next one.